Okay guys, welcome back to the next episode in our top-down free version space shooter game. Let's go in and select this enemy, because this enemy is bugging me. I don't like it. I think we need to make it the same size as the player. Or maybe just a tad bigger. Let's go 12 by 12. It's just ugly, isn't it? So let's just select that color. The color's okay. But let's draw in some kind of alien type spaceship. I don't know if this is an alien. Feel free to draw whatever you like. You're probably better at pixel art than I am anyway. Maybe that. Is that doing it for everybody? Does that look okay? Maybe we need to go... No, not that. Up one more on these. Across there and that. Maybe that. That looks okay. Does that look alright? Let's make it a darker yellow. That way the windows can stand out. There, the little cockpit where the pilot would sit. And let's go a little darker and hue shift it to orange for the back there and down the sides. Probably the whole thing. And then we can add a little bit of highlight on the wings. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I'm happy with that. There. I mean, if you can do better, then by all means, you go ahead and do whatever you like. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. So, you know, whatever. Now, because we've changed it from a generic shape to something that clearly has a direction that it needs to travel, there's a risk now that it's not going to face the way we want it to when it comes on the screen. So let's just check that. We're going to, there you go, it's flying in sideways, which is definitely not what we want. So at the beginning of the layout, when they're created, we're going to need to face them towards the player. Now remember I said to you before that facing right is default, so let's rotate it to face to the right and not preview the objects layer. That might just fix it by itself, but we'll see. There's one. There's two. Yeah, it looks like it's fixed it by itself, so there's no need to do anything with the event sheet, which is good. That saves us on events, so they're always going to face towards us now. Good, that's done. Now, when we kill the enemies, we need to add some juice. We need to juice it up a little bit, add some polish. So let's say we're going to need a new function. So instead of bomb flash, we're going to need to have enemy kill. So let's add that in. We're going to add on a function. We're going to say enemy kill. So this is what happens every time we kill the enemy. I want that screen shape back in, so I'm going to drag out a copy. Hold down Control, and you can drag a copy. But I also want to spawn in a particle effect. So let's create our first particle effect on the layer 0. Double click, find particles under General. Just click anywhere you like. These particles are going to be 2 by 2, nice and tiny, and I'm going to do them similar colors to the spaceship there. Just white on each side and then a shade of whatever it is above that. Now, if we preview that, I don't think it's going to let us. It doesn't let us cancel, which is annoying because previewing particles really does help. But I've got an idea of what it's going to look like anyway. So select the particle effect here, come over to the properties. Let's say spray cone 360 because that's going to spray them out in all different directions. It's not going to be continuous. It's going to be a one shot. The rate is going to be 20. The speed is going to be 25. The size of them are going to be 2 because that's the size of the original one. Opacity is going to be 75%. Grow rate is going to be -1, so they're going to get smaller over time. X randomizer is going to be 2. Y is going to be 2. Speed is going to be 2. Size is going to be 0. Grow rate randomizer 0, and acceleration -150. Let's see what that looks like when we kill an enemy. So we're going to say add an action, and we're going to say enemy, and we're going to say spawn another object, and that is going to be the particles that we just had on exactly those, the 0 layer and the 0 on the image point. Oh, we need to call that function now. So when we shoot, when the bullet, there we go, when the bullet hits the enemy, let's go add an action function. We're going to call the kill enemy function and pop it in at the top there. So now when we shoot one, we should get a bit of screen shake and a bit of particle effect. There you go, look at that. Doesn't that look great? And then the particles just fly out into the world. But I think they stay on the screen too long, those particles. So let's add one more thing. Click on the particles, come down here. Fade to invisible is great, but I want them to fade to invisible on 0.3 seconds rather than 1 second. So that's going to dramatically reduce the time they spend on screen. There you go, look at that. That's much nicer. So you can just see them spawn in. We get a bit of screen shake. Makes the whole game feel a little bit better. And I can now add, yeah, I can add the bomb. But what I want to do, I want these particles to spawn on the enemy when we call the bomb flash. So let's add an action, and we're going to say enemy, and we're going to say spawn another object. And that object's going to be the particles on layer 0 at image point 0, because that's the one in the center. Pop that at the top there. Now when we use the bomb, the enemies are going to destroy as if we shot them, which again ties in nicely. There you go, they destroy. And that's looking pretty nice. Right, now let's add in some things that we can shoot that aren't enemies. Or in fact, let's add in a different enemy type just to create a little bit more variety, I think. So let's close that down. I'm happy with it so far. Let's go back to our objects. I'm going to clone this one because we already have one. So we may as well just clone it. Double click into it and let's change the color of it. So let's go a much yellowy type color. In fact, what we can do when we're doing the colors is we can change this, we can untick flood fill here and it will just recolor everything that's that one color, which makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to go a little bit lighter and hue shift towards green for those ones. I'm going to go a little bit lighter again for the outside ones, probably a little bit lighter again. That's nice. And these back ones, I'm going to hue shift much more towards orange and go brown on those there. And then I want to make the cockpit here black. Or perhaps not that kind of, quite that black. And let's just add that there. So it is definitely much more distinguishable from the first one. And this one can be called Enemy 2. That's absolutely fine. In fact, I've changed my mind because I can do that. Go back into the Enemy 2, select the whole thing, and just push Ctrl-C to copy this sprite. Go back into the first enemy, and let's just add another frame along the bottom. So we've got this animation tab on the right, which allows us to animate our sprites. So let's right click on the frame in the frames panel, and we're going to duplicate it. And then we're going to push Ctrl-V, and we're going to paste in the second one. Now, if we've got more than one frame, it's important to make sure that the speed of the animation is set to 0, otherwise it will just play it. So we can push 0 on that. And that way we don't need this one and we save ourselves an object type. So we can delete it. And over here in the project folder, you can click on it and you can delete it as well. Yep. And we can go back to our event sheet now. So now when we spawn in this, this enemy type, we're going to ask it to choose the frame. So we're going to add an action and we're going to say, in fact, that's a lie. We're not going to do that. We're going to need to create another event. We've only got 8 left, but that's okay. I think we're going to be all right. We're going to go enemy, and we're going to say on created. So the moment this thing gets created, we're going to tell the system to choose what frame it should be. So we're going to say enemy, we're going to set frame, and instead of just hard coding in a frame, we're going to use that choose expression again, and we're going to say choose 0 or 1. You pick, you be the judge. Whichever one you want, just choose one and set it to that. And now that's going to create variety. Oh, not on that layer. That's going to create variety now when they start spawning in. There's that one. Same one again. We should get a different one in a sec. 3 are the same. It's a 50-50 chance, guys. Come on. There it is. You were doubting me for a second there. There's another one. I want the yellow ones to be a little bit more challenging to kill. I want them to take 2 hits. So I'm going to need to give them their own HP. In fact, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that with 7 frames remaining. That would have been nice. Maybe we can expand on this in the paid version and get all that in, but I don't want to overscope it, so I'm going to leave it at just 1 to 2. In fact, we can create multiple different. In fact, let's create one more variation of it. So right click, duplicate it. Once you're in this sprite, let's just change it to like a nice green one, just so we've got variety. Change that to green. Change that to blue. Change the outside to a nice blue, and change the back to that. In fact, let's just change the whole outside to that. That looks okay to me. And then we're going to go much darker. In fact, we could probably make the cockpit, this one, white. Yeah, that's good. And now we can just tell the system to choose frame 1, 2, 0, 1, or 2. Then we've got 3 to choose from. Just for variety purposes, it's not going to really make too much difference. Although, what I would now suggest is we change the particles to be more generic. So whites. In fact, no, that's fine. It's just like smoke. I'm overthinking it. Stop overthinking it, man. Just get the game finished. Right, so let's see what we've got now. We've got this kind of bit at the beginning where nothing's really happening. So we need to fix that. And I think a 3, 2, 1 countdown is probably going to be the way forward. Go. We can also add particle effects behind these things as a trail. Let's add the 3, 2, 1 countdown first, because I'm aware that we only have a few events left. So make sure you're on the HUD layer, just double click. We're going to add some text in. Add some text right into the middle. Remember, we're going to set the text to be the same text that we've got on screen, whichever text you've chosen, doesn't really matter. I'm going to set the width of the text box to equal the width of the game and the height as well. In fact, no, it doesn't need to be that. Just the width right around the player. And then let's set the horizontal alignment to center. Let's set the size of this to 24. There we go. So it's right around the player there. And we are going to say that the initial starting text is going to be 3, because it's going to be a 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to change the size to 30, I think. Maybe even 50. The bigger the better, right? The bigger the better. There we go. 3, 2, 1, it's going to count down. But it's going to be white because the background is dark purple, remember? So we need to make it white. We're going to name this txt_countdown. Now we need to go back into the event sheet, and we need to tell the game whether we're in game or not now, because at the beginning of the game we need this to count down, but if we just set it to count down subtract 1 every second, the game's going to start while the thing's ticking down. So we need a Boolean variable. So we're going to right click, we're going to add a global variable. This one's going to be a Boolean, and it's going to be called game started. In fact, it's going to be called game over, not game over. So this is going to tell us whether the game is over. It's going to be initially true, because when we start the game we're not playing the game. It's going to be the countdown. So it's going to be game over equals true, and now I only want this event now to call to action. I only want this to work if the game over is false, so if we're in game. So we simply just add a condition. So like we've done the whole time through, select this little bit of text, push C on the keyboard, go to system, and we're going to say is Boolean set, and we're going to just say game over. So at the moment we're saying every spawn speed seconds choose the random number and spawn something as long as the game is over, and we don't want that to happen, so we want to push I on the keyboard to invert it. So now we're saying the opposite thing. If the game if we're in game, if it's not game over, then we can start doing all of this stuff here, which is exactly what we want. Now at the beginning of the game, so we're going to need another event. We're going to say system, and we're going to say on start of layout. So when the game begins, click in here by the little green arrow. I want to drag this right to the top because it just makes sense to have on start of layout at the top. On start of layout, we need to now subtract from this every 1 second. So we're going to say add an action, and we're going to say system. No, we're not. We're going to create a sub event. We're going to select the whole thing. We're going to push B, and we're going to double click, and we're going to say system every X seconds. Now it's every 1 second. We're going to say system. No, we're going to say we're going to need a global variable again to control that countdown timer. So let's go down here. We're going to right click, add a global variable, and we're going to call it countdown timer. It's going to be a number. We're going to set it to 3 initially. Then we can come into this every tick and say countdown. Remember how we've done it every single time. Set text, the countdown timer. And on start of layout, every 1 second, we're going to say system subtract from countdown timer 1. Now, when the game begins, the system's going to start counting down from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. When it hits 0, we want the countdown timer to disappear and we want the game to start. So we need to say add an event. We need to compare the countdown timer. If it's equal or less than, because remember it can go into the minuses, if it's equal or less than 0, then we're going to need a few things to happen. We're going to add an action and we're going to say countdown timer, and we're going to say, where are you? Set visible, and we're going to say invisible. So we're going to make it go away. We're also going to say add action. We're going to go system, and we're going to set the value of the countdown timer to 0 so it doesn't tick into thousands and thousands of minuses. And we are going to say add an action system, and we're going to set the boolean of game over to false. So only when that thing hits 0 can the game actually begin, which is exactly what we want. Drag this all the way to the top, pop it in underneath starter layout, so we've got it all nice and neatly in one place. Now we've got the enemies spawning only if we're not game over. We also need all of the HUD elements to only work if we're not in game over. So you see we've got here every 10 seconds, add 1 to level. Again, that's only going to be the case if we're not game over. So you can hold down Control, make sure that this condition is selected, and you can drag it in and nest it in underneath 10 seconds. We do the same thing under 1 second as well. And that way, this is only going to now work if we're in game. So let's try that out. 3. We forgot to put something in. Every 1 second, subtract 1 from countdown timer. Every tick, set countdown timer to countdown timer. Let me just check. Is that set to visible? Initially visible. Yes. It's on the HUD layer. Yes. Countdown timer, we set it invisible, but it's not. It's on 3. On starter layout, every 1 second. Let's just take that outside of on starter layout for a minute. 2, 1. There we go. Perfect. And then the game begins. It was because it was nested in. We didn't need that on starter layout, because that's just saying that do it once the game started, and obviously once the game started it's no longer started, so it wouldn't tick down every 1 second. So we can just bring that out, and that's actually fine by itself. Now when we lose that, we've got 5 left, and we need to condition in what happens when we lose. So we need to put down on here add an event. So we're going to say if enemy, and we're going to say on collision with another object, and we're going to say player. So if the enemy touches the player, then it's game over time. And we're going to need to create another function for that. So we're going to right click, we're going to add a function, and we're going to say game over. This is the game over function. If the enemy collides with the player, well, we want screen shake, obviously. We want screen shake. We're going to spawn in these particles, but we want the player this time to spawn them in. So we're going to say player, spawn another object, and these objects are going to be particles. We're going to spawn them in exactly at 0, 0. We also, what else do we want? We want a screen that pops up that says game over. So let's go back on our HUD layer. I'm going to double click, I'm going to add in a tile background, and we're going to set it to 16 by 16, and I'm going to color this one black, and I'm going to make the opacity 80%, so we can just about see everything through it. I'm going to cover the screen with it. This one is going to be called TB Game Over Screen. I don't think I can add in another layer. No, you only get 2. How annoying. How annoying, right? But that's okay. We can disable the HUD layer if we need to. We're almost done with it, so it's not going to hinder us too much now. So that's on the HUD layer, which is great. Make sure we're still on the HUD layer. We're going to add some text. Again, I'm going to set it to the width of the screen. I'm going to change the text to our text that we downloaded, and I am going to make it white, and I am going to center it, and I'm going to set the text to say game over, and then underneath I'm going to say press spacebar to continue. So this is just generic text, so I'm going to call it txt underscore generic, because it doesn't serve a purpose like keeping count of anything. And that way I can hold down control and drag out a copy, make this one half the size at 6, and this one is going to say, oh, keep that in, and this one is going to say press space bar to play a game. Now we're telling the player to push something, so if we're pressing spacebar, we're going to need to add that in. So we're going to double click, we're going to need to add in the keyboard, and now we need to code that in on the event sheet. So we're going to go back to the event sheet. We've got 3 events left, so we're getting right down to the wire. Let's first of all call that game over function once we die. So we're going to call game over, and remember we need to set that boolean, don't we? So we're going to come in and set boolean of game over to true, because all of these things are going to stop working then, which is what we want. We want the game to pause itself effectively. So when we set game over to true, that's going to be perfect. That'll work just fine. So we call that function, we set game over to true. Now we need to add an event, and we need to go keyboard on key pressed, and it has to be spacebar because we said that in the text. Then we're going to go up here and we're going to say system, and we are going to say restart layout. The 2 events to go, but we only want to be able to push this spacebar to restart if we're in game over. So is boolean set, add that condition game over. So if we're in game over, when we push the spacebar, we restart the layout. Let's see if that works. Oh, we've got it set at the beginning as visible. Right, let's get all of this text here. Select them both. Come down here where it says initially visible. Uncheck it. Get this game over title screen. Uncheck initially visible, so they're not going to show. Go back to the event sheet. In the game over function, we're going to need to set them to visible. So find the game over screen. Set it visible. Visible. We also need to set the generic text visible, text generic, set visible, visible. Perfect. So all of these things now are going to be called when we have game over. And now that means on the start of the layout, when we restart the layout, we're going to need to reset them to invisible. So let me show you what happens if we don't. If we just leave it at that, we hit play. Let me just get killed by the first one. Game over. So press spacebar to play again. Oh, these things are still spawning in. We can change that. If I push spacebar to play again, I'm playing again, but the game over screen is still on the front. So we need to go back in and use up our last couple of events here. We're going to add an event, and we're going to say system, and now we need to get that on start of layout back. Let's drag it up to the top. On the start of layout, we need to do the opposite of this. So we need to take these 2 here that we've just said, and this one, and we need to hold down control and copy, drag it up, and just pop it in up here. So in fact, we don't need that because it's going to default to game over true at the beginning, but we're going to need to set these invisible there, and we're going to need to go back down to game over or on spacebar pressed. Before we do restart layout, we're going to say we're going to need to reset all the global variables. So if we scroll down, Where are you? Reset global variables. So all the score and everything, we're going to reset that back to its default. Then we're going to restart the layout. In fact, let's add a short wait in between those two. So I'm going fast. Double click on system, add wait, add a 0.1 second wait, just to make sure there's no bugs between that transition. Then we restart the layout, everything's invisible again. We also need the spawning, but we've got that here. We've got if game over is false, so that shouldn't be continuing to spawn. Although, okay, because we need to reset the random number generator, I think. Let's see, what have we got down here? Game over. Let's just see what happens when I play it now. 3, 2, 1. Off we go. Bring in the enemies. Get killed. Game over. Yeah, they're spawning in still, but I think they're only going to come in. Oh no, they're coming in from all over the place. But they shouldn't be, because we've told it to set game over to true when the enemy collides with the player. We must have a conflicting statement up here. Yeah, if the countdown timer is less than or equal to 0. So what we need to do in the game over function is we need to set that countdown timer back to 3, because that's conflicting with us. So we're going to set the value countdown timer back to 3. It's going to reset it anyway when we press spacebar, but if we do that here, it's going to stop those enemies spawning in. Run into me, and there we go. They're not spawning in anymore because the countdown timer is back. But I was still able to click it there and continue, and that's a bug we need to fix. So we need to disable the player's ability to shoot. So let's again use this same condition. If it's not game over, hold down control, and we're going to drag this down. So we're going to drag it up to on left clicked, as long as we're not game over. The same thing we're going to do with the bomb as well. On right click, as long as we've got more than 0 bombs and it's not game over. Let's set our bombs global variable back to 0. Let's test that out. 3, 2, 1. Destroyed. Absolutely nothing I can do by clicking until I hit spacebar. And now the text hasn't disappeared again. Let's fix that. What is going on? What is going on, everybody? On start of layout. Yeah, set that invisible, set that invisible. Call game over function. I think on press spacebar, we need to make these two visible again. Invisible, sorry. Invisible. Invisible, and then go restart the layout. Take those off. Lose that. That gives us an event back. 3, 2, 1. Come and kill me. Game over. Space. There we go. 3, 2, 1. And we're back. And we're scrolling in. Spacebar to play again. 3, 2, 1. And now we can go. That is looking pretty good, in my opinion. You tell me what you think. I'm quite happy with that, especially considering we did it all in the free version of Construct. Some nice little juicy camera shakes and some particle effects. We've got 2 events left. Let's just see, can we implement a save feature? Does it allow us to add local storage in the free version? If it does, then we might be able to do something with that. Where's my local storage? Local storage. I can add it in. So we could. Can I do saving in 2 events? I'm going to need an on start of layout. I think I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to leave it here for now, and then in the next episode we're going to finish off the little bits of polish. We're going to use up these last 2 events because, you know, we may as well use them. We've got them, and then we're going to see if we can add in a save function and display the high scores and everything on the screen. So I'll see you in the next one.